Temperatures are forecast to top out on Friday at just 8 degrees Fahrenheit in Pittsburgh, the largest city in western Pennsylvania, surpassing its previous all-time coldest Christmas Eve high of 13 F, set in 1983, the National Weather Service said. The flurry of Yuletide temperature records were predicted as a U.S. deep freeze sharpened by perilous wind chills continued to envelope much of the eastern two-thirds of the nation into the holiday weekend. The Arctic cold combined with a cyclone bomb of heavy snow and howling winds roaring out of the Great Lakes region on Friday and into the upper Mississippi and Ohio valleys to wreak havoc on power systems, roadways and commercial air traffic. Extreme winter weather was blamed for at least 5 deaths on Friday. 2 motorists were killed, and numerous others injured, in a 50-vehicle pileup that shut down the Ohio Turnpike in both directions during a blizzard near Toledo, forcing an evacuation of stranded motorists by bus to keep them from freezing in their cars, officials said. Freezing rain and ice from a separate storm in the Pacific Northwest made travel treacherous there as well on Friday. Border to border. From the Canadian to the Mexican border and coast to coast, some 240 million people in all were under winter weather warnings and advisories of some sort on Friday, according to the Weather Service. The NWS said its map of existing or impending meteorological hazards depicts one of the greatest extensive winter weather warnings and advisories ever. With energy systems across the country strained by rising demand for heat and storm-related damage to transmission lines, as many as 1.5 million U.S. homes and businesses were left without power on Friday, according to tracking site poweroutage.us. The disruptions upended daily routines and holiday plans for millions of Americans during one of the busiest travel periods of the year. The American Automobile Association had estimated that 112.7 million people planned to venture 50 miles or more from home between Friday and January 2nd. But stormy weather heading into the weekend likely ended up keeping many of them at home. More than 5,700 U.S. flights were canceled on Friday, according to flight tracking service FlightAware, while blizzard conditions virtually paralyzed road travel in some regions. The city of Buffalo and its surrounding county on the edge of Lake Erie in western New York imposed a driving ban, and all 3 Buffalo area border crossing bridges were closed to inbound traffic from Canada due to the weather. The severe weather prompted authorities across the country to open warming centers in libraries and police stations while scrambling to expand temporary shelter for the homeless. The challenge was compounded by the influx of migrants crossing the U.S. southern border by the thousands in recent weeks. Bitter cold intensified by high winds extended through the deep south to the U.S.-Mexico border, plunging wind chill factors to single digits Fahrenheit in El Paso, Texas. Exposure to such conditions can cause frostbite within minutes.
Kurds clash with police in Paris for second day after killings. Cars were overturned, at least one vehicle was burned and small fires set alight near Republic Square, the traditional venue for demonstrations in the city where Kurds earlier held a peaceful protest. Clashes broke out as some demonstrators left the square, throwing projectiles at police who responded with tear gas. Skirmishes continued for around 2 hours before the protesters dispersed. A gunman carried out the killings at a Kurdish cultural center and nearby cafe on Friday in a busy part of Paris' 10th district, stunning a community preparing to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the unresolved murder of 3 activists. Police arrested a 69-year-old man who the authorities said had recently been freed from detention while awaiting trial for a saber attack on a migrant camp in Paris a year ago. Following questioning of the suspect, investigators had added a suspected racist motive to initial accusations of murder and violence with weapons, the prosecutor's office said on Saturday. After an angry crowd clashed with police on Friday afternoon, the Kurdish Democratic Council in France organized a gathering on Saturday at Republic Square. Hundreds of Kurdish protesters, joined by politicians including the mayor of Paris' 10th district, waved flags and listened to tributes to the victims. "We are not being protected at all. In 10 years, 6 Kurdish activists have been killed in the heart of Paris in broad daylight," Barivan Fired, a spokesperson for the CDKF, told BFM TV at the demonstration. She said the event turned violent after some protesters were provoked by people in a passing vehicle who displayed a Turkish flag and made a nationalistic gesture. Friday's murders came ahead of the anniversary of the killings of 3 Kurdish women in Paris in January 2013. An investigation was dropped after the main suspect died shortly before coming to trial, before being reopened in 2019. The Kurdish community is afraid. It was already traumatized by the triple murder. It needs answers, support, and consideration, David Andic, a lawyer representing the CDKF, told reporters on Friday. Kurdish representatives, who met with Paris police chief on Saturday, reiterated their call for Friday's shooting to be considered a terror attack. The questioning of the suspect was continuing, the prosecutor's office added.
El Paso churches house migrants who don't qualify for city shelter. Unsheltered migrants wait for bed space to open for the evening in the gymnasium at Sacred Heart Church after crossing the Rio Grande into the United States in El Paso, Texas, on Thursday. Unsheltered migrants wait for bed space to open for the evening in the gymnasium at Sacred Heart Church after crossing the Rio Grande into the United States in El Paso, Texas, on Thursday. Families who live here stroll through the annual holiday display downtown where a 55-foot tree glitters with ornaments and hundreds of thousands of tiny lights are strung everywhere. People snap photos near the life-size nativity scene depicting the baby Jesus in the manger. As the Christmas story goes, there was no room at the inn for Mary and Joseph. It's what thousands of migrants who've recently crossed the US-Mexico border now face: no place to sleep or stay. Just a few blocks away from the Christmas festivities, a young mother cradles her 4-month-old baby on the sidewalk outside the bus station. An unsheltered migrant from Peru holds her daughter as they wait for bed space to open for the evening in the gymnasium at Sacred Heart Church. An unsheltered migrant from Peru holds her daughter as they wait for bed space to open for the evening in the gymnasium at Sacred Heart Church. Lispa, who is Venezuelan and whose last name we are not using because she and her family slipped into the country without documents, says she's afraid to seek shelter. "I'm scared because of all we've been through and that they'll send us back," she says in Spanish. Only people who turned themselves into the Border Patrol and now have immigration paperwork can sleep in the 1,000 cots at the city's convention center. The city says that's a rule of the federal government, which is helping to cover the shelter's costs. Over the last few days, some churches have opened their doors to all migrants, regardless of their immigration status, bringing them in from the bitter cold. David Carrero, from Venezuela, has been spending nights at Sacred Heart Church with his wife and baby boy. Unsheltered migrants move mattresses outside Sacred Heart Church after crossing the Rio Grande into the United States in El Paso, Texas, on Thursday. Unsheltered migrants move mattresses outside Sacred Heart Church after crossing the Rio Grande into the United States in El Paso, Texas, on Thursday. "They've supported us and given us food, and people have dropped off food, clothes, and toys for the children," Carrero says, in Spanish. Back at the bus station, local residents Adon Amazaga, his wife, and 2 young daughters have given out gallons of coffee and more than 1,000 sandwiches to migrants during the last several days. "For Christmas every year we like to sponsor a family," says Amazaga. They passed out beanies, scarves, and gloves. While migrants had been hoping for the biggest Christmas gift of all, the lifting of pandemic border restrictions that would allow them to seek asylum in the United States, which did not happen, they are grateful for the kindness of strangers this holiday season. Volunteers with Border Network for Human Rights hand out blankets and supplies to unsheltered migrants outside Sacred Heart Church. Volunteers with Border Network for Human Rights hand out blankets and supplies to unsheltered migrants outside Sacred Heart Church.